Good morning, everyone. My name is Linda Kennedy. It's my pleasure to talk to you here today about reward, but in particular, I'm going to focus on you yourselves as reward practitioners. If I just quickly give you my background so you know who you've got standing in front of you. I've been an HR director now for the past 17 years, operating at group level across various industries, various companies, and also various geographies. I'm currently the Group HR Director of a business called SIG. We operate in the building materials distribution space, things like roofing, insulation, interiors. We've probably supplied 3 out of 4 buildings in the UK and across Europe, and very highly probably something in this room we're sitting in today. We've got 10,500 employees across the globe, where revenues are around 2.6 million, and we operate in various countries, including the UK, Europe, and the Middle East. So today, I think what is key is, in spite of all the data and all the analytics that you've got now at your disposal, and supporting the theme of today, which is all about innovation and reward, the critical thing is actually how you work with your peers. Because you can have the best solution, the best data, the best analytics. If you as reward professionals can't influence, can't drive change, can't engage the business around that, then quite frankly, it doesn't matter how good you are technically, you simply won't be able to get the traction. And I'm sure we've all been there, right? You develop a fantastic bonus plan or a really strong LTIP and you get the best possible technical outcome that you can, and you take it and present it, and it just doesn't land, it doesn't fly, and you step back and think, you know, where did I go wrong? And very often it's about how you've engaged with the business, how you've influenced and built relationships that dictates that. So I want to spend a bit of time talking about that today. And I think the other point to make is this can apply actually to any aspect of your life, not just around the reward agenda, because it's all about how you work and engage at the senior level. And I think the thing that's key is at this stage, you're all reward practitioners, you're all experienced, so technical skills, they're kind of a given, they're the entry ticket to the game. What will differentiate you is how you bring those to bear in your organisation. And I think there's 3 key things that are quite important here. It's your knowledge and your skills, bringing those to bear. It's really how you become a key member of the team, be that a leadership team or an HR team. And it's also about how you influence at the senior level. I'd like to take a minute just to look at these and see how they play out in real life. So it goes without saying that you've got the reward expertise, you've done the studying, you've got the technical skill set, that's great. But the real issue, I think, is around having business impact. What do I mean by business impact? It's an often overused term. Well, I think the first thing you can do to quantify impact is really measure results. And it's not something typically that HR are generally good at. I think in reward, you probably have a head start, right? Because you already use the data and the numbers. You're probably quite used to quantifying things. So then it's about how you bring that to bear and sell it in. And I think it's about talking with confidence. I think it's about actually demonstrating that you understand the business drivers and talking the business language. And there it's all around looking at the risk and the cost of what you're trying to do, demonstrating to people that you are solving a pain point for them. I have never yet met a leader that doesn't want help with solving one of his pain points. So if you can show that the solution that you've built actually answers the questions being asked or remedies the issues at hand, then you're halfway there. I think along with that, in terms of understanding the business, you've got to know the financial performance, you've got to understand the dynamics, you've got to know the competition. You know, I definitely know early on in my career, I certainly regret not having been broader sooner, if that makes sense. And that's all about gaining credibility and talking the business language with people and understanding the key things that the business is trying to deliver. If I look right now in SIG, we've just got a new chief exec and he has a strategy of driving sales effectiveness. It's become a big priority for us. So now my priority and that of my reward team is thinking about how we support that and drive it. And it's looking at reorganizing and replanning the bonus structures, of course, but it's looking at also engaging with the business to understand where do we really make the money? How do we really drive the change? Is it about volume? Is it about value? Should the split be 50-50? You can only make that call and propose that solution if you truly understand what the business is trying to drive. When I worked in Orange and T-Mobile, we did a very big merger, the biggest merger actually of its kind still in UK history. We did it in 9 months. We put together 2 businesses, 7.2 billion, 16,500 employees, and we had to integrate completely the reward landscape. We had call centres, we had sales staff out in the field, we had the mobile shops and the stores that you see on the high street, and we had our back office staff. And we had to somehow pull all of that together behind a new business strategy, which was being the market leader, when we had been really challengers and competitor brands. We had a huge cultural piece of work to do, and Reward supported that by making sure that the things that underpinned the integration were rewarded and recognised in the right way. We celebrated successes, and we did it very early on to start building that team spirit of a joint collaboration. And we underpinned all of that with reward and recognition of the right behaviours. So understanding the business, the context in which you're operating, and then applying the right reward solution is absolutely key. If I look at another thing that I think is critical, and this really applies to general HR practitioners as well, but it's how do you go about building real credibility and trust? In our business, doing what you do, delivering the solutions is par for the course, but really having the ability to get people to listen to what you need to say, engaging with them and building trust is key. And I really like Meister's trust equation, which talks about how you can do that in a very straightforward and easy way. On the top line of this slide, you see the positives. So if you're credible, if you're reliable, and if you can develop a level of intimacy, that will help you to gain trust. Every time you do something below the line, which is all about self-orientation and self-interest, you will destroy that trust. And I think if you can bear that in mind as you're going through your careers and building the trust with individuals, if you put them at the forefront of everything you do, and you show that what you're developing and delivering is to address their issue and fix their pain point, then that trust will build. And over time, that will come. The intimacy piece, I think, is always a difficult one. How close do you get to people? When I worked at Serco, my chief exec there was a guy called Chris Hyman. He was mad on racing driving. And how I went about building that relationship with him was, I'm not a Grand Prix fan, but I learned every Sunday afternoon to watch the starting few laps and the end few laps of whatever Grand Prix race was on that weekend. And I'd come in the morning, I'd say, Chris, did you see that race at the weekend? Wasn't Lewis Hamilton dreadful? And we would have a chat about that, and that was how we started to build the relationship so that we got to a position of real intimacy and trust. I think as well it's really important to influence and find the win-win, and I think this is particularly challenging or particularly important when you're operating with REMCOMs and boards. I don't know how many of you in the room are actually operating at the reward director level, and it is a different way of operating, I think, than when you're perhaps a reward advisor or a reward manager, simply because nearly all the decisions about reward are taken outside the room. So unlike most meetings where you go and present to a leadership team, you get the engagement, you have the discussion, at board level it's a lot about lobbying ahead of time, influencing, building a relationship with your REMCOM chair, getting a balance between what the board are looking for and what the executive want to drive, and making sure you've got a fit-for-purpose solution that everybody can buy into. So influencing, finding the win-win, there you're going to be spending a lot of time outside the room to do that. I think as well, if you're in the boardroom, showing empathy, demonstrating understanding for people's problems, and quoting people as you present. I know, Bill, you've got a problem in your division with retention. I know, Susan, you've got a problem with wage competition in London. Showing you can address people's specific problems will be really useful to you. And showing the what's in it for them. Everybody wants something in it for us. We're all the same. People will only change behaviours if they have one of two things. Either a benefit or a consequence. Benefits are usually positive, consequences are often negative. But either way, if you're trying to influence and drive change and you're leading through the reward line, then those are the things you need to think about. And I think also getting involved outside of reward and networking is key. I remember I used to work for a company called BHP Billiton, and we had an office with a huge atrium in London. And I used to always see my group HR director sitting having coffee. And I used to think, there he is again, sitting having a coffee. And we're all upstairs, beavering away, delivering. But I soon realized that actually all of those coffees were really important conversations where he was networking, building relationships, influencing, and actually quietly moving things along, progressing the people agenda to support the business agenda, and doing that in a very clever and subtle way. As you become more senior, the split of what you do should also change. When you're in your early days of your reward career and you're doing a lot of analytics and data and numbers, it tends to be pretty much operational. As you move up the ladder, you'll find that split changes, and it pretty much moves to being 50% operational, 50% strategic. And I don't like the term strategic, but what I mean by that is helping to get things done, helping to demonstrate the value. Half of it's developing the solution or the PowerPoint presentation or whatever the paper is for the executive team or the board, but the other half is massaging it in and helping it through and helping people to see what's in it for them and how it's going to be of benefit. The other thing about networking, I think it's great if you can get experience outside of reward. You know, it's always good to do something outside your comfort zone and push yourself that little bit. So if you get the chance, I would really encourage you to do it. When I worked with Serco, I went to an acquisition in India of a £65 million business with 10,000 people. Had never done an acquisition of that size and scale in my life. It was terrifying, almost as terrifying as driving in Delhi was. But I really enjoyed it and I got a lot from it, so I'd recommend doing that if you can. Talking about broadening relationships, I think it's also important that you think about where you're working and the types of people you need to get involved with. You know, I used to go to networking events and just be really happy to have a glass of wine in the canopies. But one event I went to with a colleague, and he had a list with all the names of the people attending the event highlighted, and what he wanted to see each person about and why he wanted to do it. And I thought, God, that's a bit Machiavellian, isn't it? That's a little bit clinical. But actually, when you're networking and you're broadening relationships, you're spending your time, why wouldn't you want to try and get something from it? So it's about thinking about that in a more structured way, building your networks and building those relationships more widely than just in reward. We're here, of course, today to talk about data and analytics, and my presentation wouldn't be complete without touching on that. All the things we've spoken about up till now are about how you personally build and drive your credibility and build trust. But clearly, you've got a great thing at your disposal as reward experts, which, of course, is data. And so the good thing for you compared to us generalist HR bods is you're already data savvy, you're already hopefully very strong on the numbers, and therefore you are used to building business cases on this basis. But I think really providing insight is key, and exactly what Neil referred to earlier, I call this the value wall, because I think companies are always at different stages along this path. Starts with metrics and ratios. I guess if I asked you all, a lot of hands would go up and you'd say you've got metrics and ratios. And I think a lot of you would probably say you've got benchmarks and you've probably got scorecards which you use to measure performance and you use to measure impact. Surveys are also a popular one. I'm sure most of your businesses do employee engagement surveys, or even some of you reward surveys. But then we pretty much tend to hit the value wall because it gets hard. Beyond this point where we're looking to start to drive analytics to give us correlation, to give us causation, and eventually give us prediction, which is effectively the Google model, those things are difficult, right? Because the data is hard to get your hands on. If you work in a multiple geography business, it's all over the place. It's not using common metrics, so you can't get alignment that way. Often people don't know how to gather the data, so there's a gap in terms of experience, and very often the tools are not there to allow you to pull that data together, so you end up with a bunch of Excel spreadsheets, and I'm sure we've all been there. If I look at where we were or where we are now in SIG, we're definitely on this side of the value wall. But when I was with EE, I would say we moved towards the other side of the value wall. And we moved into predictive analytics by correlating different data points together to build a business case. Good example outside of reward would be employee engagement survey, correlating with customer feedback, correlating with sales. And that really allows you to build a strong business case around those three angles. You'll know in your business which things are important for reward and which things are supporting your business to drive towards delivering its strategy, and those are the things that you need to try and pull together to correlate. And it's not easy. You know, Google, as we mentioned earlier, it is the only fully automated HR function in the world currently, fully automated. And they know that every single employee generates £1 million of revenue and £200,000 of profitability. Imagine if you had the ability to demonstrate that in your business. The power that the data and the analytics will give you, along with the softer skills we spoke about earlier, is a really strong combination. The other thing I want to just touch on is using benchmarks. Some examples up there on the screen of various benchmarks. I don't think we're very good at doing this. We don't do as much as we should. The benchmarks are really powerful pieces of data. They show us what good looks like, they show us best in class, and you will know in your business which reward metrics are the most appropriate to use in terms of benchmarks. But they really do help you to build a business case. Again, when I joined SIG, we had a very limited HR function. We didn't have centers of excellence, and I was able, through using data from other organizations, to show that actually the URIC model was quite common, that it was something that could really help us to deliver, and I therefore was able to build the team, and I used the data and the benchmarks to really help me to do that. So just some practical advice, and forgive me, some of this is quite basic, but I think sometimes in the day-to-day you can forget. You know, really knowing your business and your audience is critical. Thinking about the kinds of questions you're going to get, anticipating those and preparing for them is also key. And that involves having your data, having your metrics ready. Demonstrating the business case we've spoken a little bit about, but one key point that I would make here is it's really important that you talk about the how and not the what. You are trusted to come up with the right solution. The right technical solution will be what you're putting forwards. What the business wants to know is, what does it mean for them? Why is it right for them? How are they going to implement it? What will be the results? And most importantly, will it help them in their day-to-day roles? So talk about the why and the how, as well as the what. And I think moving from operational to strategic is key, spending that different split of time on the day-to-day versus the influencing and relationship building, and also having the courage of your convictions. You know, you can pretty much pull anything off if you do it with confidence. Assuming that your technical solution is right, the thing that might very well get it over the line for you is presenting it with confidence. So be bold and have the courage of your convictions would be what I would say. I think really, in terms of demonstrating the value added reward, we're going to talk a lot for the rest of the day about data and analytics, and clearly that is moving at pace and we need to keep up with it. But my parting message to you would be, it's all about how you do it. Think about your delivery, think about how you want to be remembered when you leave the room, think about getting the credibility and the trust of your leadership team, and absolutely have faith in your own abilities and the confidence to deliver. I think if we can do all of these things, we'll be successful, trusted advisors and reward specialists. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jordan. I lead the People Analytics practice globally at Nestle. And I wanted to pick up on a couple of things that the other speakers this morning have talked to you about, but then actually dive into some case studies around what my team have done to support our reward practice globally as well, to sort of show you some of the partnership that exists between the reward function and the analytics function. Who actually has an analytics function? Are they your best friends? My reward function, they're my best friends in Nestle. It's awesome, because we don't need to start at that baseline and start explaining what's in the data and how maths works, which means that we can accelerate. And so a couple of the examples that I have today are things that we did really, really rapidly within about the first 6 months of this year, just because the drive of the reward team were able to really drive the agenda with the rest of the business, because you guys use data and use analytics in ways that sometimes HR generalists are less ready to do. So a little bit about Nestle, because in context, I think it's important to understand how massive and how very small we are at the same time. So I'm an Australian, and when I joined Nestle about 18 months ago, I'd have sworn black and blue that Milo was a local Australian business. I'd have told you that Uncle Toby's was a local Australian business. I'd have told you that Nestle had nothing to do with skincare, and yet we own Restylane. I'm still waiting for my free Botox injections, but So we're big. We're in 191 countries. We're big financially. We've got 2,000 brands, et cetera, et cetera. What that means is that we don't just sell Kit Kats. And despite Kit Kats being delicious, what we actually try to do, and the reason that our business is as complex as it is that we're really trying to enhance the quality of life by contributing to a healthy future. What that means is our story is relatively complex. So on the far right-hand side, where we started as a simple company, we were founded by Henri Nestle about 150 years ago because this Austrian doctor had moved from Austria to Switzerland after the First World War. Not after the First World War, way before the First World War. Goodness me. A local woman in Vevey, which is the village that our headquarters is still in, couldn't get her child to breastfeed, and so she showed up at Dr. Nestle's house and said, help, and he invented baby formula. And so that's why Nestle exists, not to do chocolate, despite the fact that we do several very good ones. We then formed a partnership with a couple of American brothers who were into the dairy business. Surprise, Switzerland and dairy. They started building things like condensed milk and powdered milk and chocolate products and cheese products. And then across time, the ambition of Nestle really moved beyond being that local Swiss infant nutrition and dairy business to being a broader science-based nutrition, well-being, pet care. There was a L'Oreal partnership for a long time. So our portfolio is really, really different. So if they're our businesses, the way that they're managed is what Nestle likes to call simple complexity. So we are one Nestle. And within that one Nestle, we have some businesses that are exclusively locally managed within our markets. So you can see at the center of our world there, we have the markets. Some of those markets are single country. Some of those markets are multi-country. Some of those markets only have our food business in them. Some of those markets have all of those businesses on the last slide in them. So we are this big, but also sometimes this small all at the same time. We also then have our zones. So zones are our geographic alignment around Europe, Middle East, and North Africa, the Americas, Asia, Oceania, and the rest of Africa. And then we have our globally managed businesses. So brands like Nespresso that we might know thanks to Mr. Clooney, rather than being managed locally or through a zone, they're then managed globally. So why am I telling you this? It means that our HR practices, whilst trying to service a global company, also need to service very, very small companies. What does that mean for me as our lead in people analytics? That across time, we've developed a landscape within Nestle that's actually very difficult for us to aggregate from the bottom to the top. And that's, I guess, enter Jordan. So as I said, I joined Nestle about 18 months ago. Now, CHRO issued 3 challenges to me, and they were them. So that was ensure that businesses have got access to and the capability to work with people analytics to make better people decisions. Make sure, and I think the second one is the big one, and it's what drives our partnership with the other parts of HR, is that analytics are useful and actionable in the business. So my team, we're IO psychologists, we're management consultants, we're statisticians, and we can swim around in data looking for interesting things that are fascinating to us and exclusively not useful to anyone else in the business. So we deliberately don't do that. We're really driven by point number 2, that we're only doing things that the business find useful. And again, that any business anywhere is able to engage in people analytics and use it effectively. The reason that there's a real focus on that any business anywhere is driven out of the way that Nestle grew. So you saw that last slide where we grew by acquisition, and we've got really different lines of business. We're really different geographically. It also means that in different parts of the business, there's more or less money to go around, which means the businesses are more or less mature in their HR practices, including analytics. So in the UK, you may have seen some of my team present at conferences gone by. The UK has had a team for a little while. The US has had a couple. That's because traditionally they were our biggest, richest markets and could afford to move the agenda in a lot of the HR tech space and a lot of the HR maturity space. Others, not so much. And so a real challenge aligned to number 2 is make sure we're not building solutions that you can only use if you're running a business of 6,000 plus people. We have businesses that have less than 60 people in some of those markets. So we need to be able to make sure that whatever we're pitching is usable at any level of the organization. Let's move then into what that means we do. Very, very quickly, I own everything from orchestrating people strategy. So it means working with HR directors to do their HR planning each year. So it could be traditional 5-year plus forecasts, statistically understanding what the demand for labor is going to be across that time, through to the annual, how do you assign this cost to this person within this budget. We then do the analytics, both descriptive and predictive, which is the stuff that my team loves. And then on the bottom side is the stuff that we have to do and we have to get right, which isn't particularly sexy and it isn't particularly fun, but having the HR data standards that say that everywhere in the world we call a headcount and we count an FTE in the same way. It's critically important to enable dashboards. That means that my team don't need to do reporting and we can support the other teams to use analytics to make decisions. So that's what we mean when we say people analytics. You'll get different definitions from different businesses, I'm sure. What I want to focus on in 2 case studies is box 2. Because it's the stuff that excites my team and it's the stuff that's really excited the reward team at Nestle as well. So, our global head of reward at Nestle joined them, he joined before me 4 to 5 years ago. And in the same way that I was challenged to change the way that Nestle does people analytics, he was challenged to change the way Nestle does reward. So he's mapped out what their path to maturity has been. And kind of resonating with that second point that was my challenge, he received the same, which was make sure this is business relevant, make sure that the business cares, make sure that you're delivering business results. So he sort of presents that, this is all of the stuff that reward has done to become more mature in markets to drive better business results. And he was challenged earlier in the year to deliver back to the business the so what. So you've built this mature reward function. That's very nice for reward, but so what? What are you delivering to the business and how do you measure that? So in partnership with my team, we decided that we would measure what that actually means in some tangible ways. So Nestle and I is Nestle's engagement survey, and there's a bit of joint ownership between the reward function and the analytics function of that. The reward function is really responsible for driving the agenda around that engagement survey, but then all of the data, the fun stuff, my team gets to do, right? Who doesn't love working with data? In the engagement survey itself, what we were able to measure was that the questions that measured employee and line manager satisfaction with reward have improved across time. So between 2012 and 2016, we were looking at favorable results received by the rewards function. We're looking at single-digit improvements from 2014, double-digit from 2012, and actually showing that there's an improvement above the high-performing company's norm. That would be a benchmark. I have a purist analytics view on benchmarks, and that is that I broadly don't especially like them, because I think that they can be abused. A benchmark, in my view, shows us what other people are doing. And I think that Linda makes a great point, and it's that we understand what the measures are for our business that are important. So for us to be a single-digit % above the high-performing norm is huge for Nestle, because it's actually shown a bunch of change. But had we set being above the single-digit norm 4 years ago when we'd started as a target, it probably wouldn't have worked, and we wouldn't have shown progress towards that immediately. Because that benchmark shows us what other people do, not what we do. So benchmarks tells us about the reward function. We've got some engagement survey data, but that's still not telling us the so what for the business, right? We then added a bunch of other data to this. So we connected the engagement results about reward to a bunch of other HR results. And we saw that in markets and in zones where the reward maturity measures were higher, we were also seeing performance distributions that were better aligned to what the talent organization were expecting as performance distributions. We're also seeing that the way that we rated leaders in those places were more favorable as well. Obviously, the reward scores that they were measuring themselves against operationally were better too, so things like their compa ratios and all of those metrics. But then interestingly, and what's really getting traction with our businesses, is that forget the HR stuff. We can actually show that where our reward function has moved along that path to maturity, those businesses are also performing better financially, and that's reflected in things like net sales, organic growth, and so on. Obviously, I can't share actual figures because I would be shot by the entire management group of Nestle, but the analytics does show that there is positive correlation. Correlation, not causation, not prediction. For us, Nestle is quite new to doing people analytics in a systemic way. So for us to be able to show for the first time that engagement survey that Reward owns and measures itself with, and the reward metrics that Reward owns and measures itself with, are directly related to improvements in performance data and improvements in business data has been huge. And I think this is something that for us, and particularly in my group, it's showing the power not of people analytics, but of the power that we can drive in the business when we partner across the different silos that we're trying to break down, obviously, in HR. So the partnership between reward and people analytics. So this one I would sort of label as one of our more strategic pieces. It's really driving interest from our business to engage with our reward function to enable them to become more mature, because they are seeing the direct benefit in their businesses themselves. Next one, a little bit more operational, no less important, and a little bit more statsy. So the last time I built statistics was going on about 20 years ago during my psychology degree. So if you do have questions about the stats, I will either lie confidently or I will come back to you if you are looking for something about the model itself. But I'll get one of my psychologists to actually give me the right answer. What we're looking at in this pay analysis was that there's increasing scrutiny for us on whether we are rewarding people equitably, regardless of where they sit in the business. We want to be able to prove that we reward our high performers better than we reward our low performers, and so on. And so again, in partnership with the reward team, we've built a tool that's now used by our entire compensation and benefits community and the people analytics community to measure this difference in the way that we remunerate and reward people. A little bit on the technology, we use R as a statistical package to do all of the statistics. We've then actually built this tool, I'm going to do my build and then speak to it, built this tool in an app called Shiny. Nestle is wall-to-wall SAP and or Microsoft. So if SAP offer it in terms of data warehousing, we use it. If Microsoft offer it in terms of data visualization and reporting, we also use it. If they work together, even better. But this tool was basically built using a Microsoft app called Shiny that enables a reward person or a people analytics person to take salary data from payroll and take whatever other data we want to compare the financial results against, load it into this tool, and then work through a stepwise regression model that tells me what's going to be predictive of a statistically significant difference in the salary of one of those predictive elements. So effectively, the process is we upload the data, you select the market you're in, you select the conditions that you want to analyze on, you build out the model following kind of the paint by numbers guide in this tool. You check to see that the model is going to be statistically significant, and then you interpret the results and work with your business, again, in partnership. Analytics are cool for me, less so for a line manager in a business who just wants to know if they're going to get into trouble because they're not statistically significantly differentiating the way that they pay people. So what does it look like? We can throw in a bunch of control variables. So the things that we want to hold consistent. So the sort of job that you do, say, the level of seniority that you have in the organization, your tenure, and so on. We have an independent variable, in this case performance, so we want to see whether we're disproportionately paying high performers more than low performers. Now, dependent variable, obviously pay. We throw that all into the model, and it spits out an analysis. So this one we thought was going to be the thing that really drove interest in the businesses, because it actually shows you the statistical difference in the way that people are paid. What we found was actually really interesting, and what drove more interest was actually this heat map. And so my message, if there is one, is that you can get a people analytics team to build something hot, something sexy, something that tells you the statistical difference in the way that you pay high performers or low performers, or any other dimension that you care to vary, male, female perhaps. And they'll spit it out and it'll be awesome. But you might actually find more utility in something far simpler. And there's nothing wrong with that, particularly when you're trying to work with the smaller businesses where statistical differences aren't really found because they've got such small sample sizes. So what you use to share, tailored to audience. That's all I've got, which is handy because that just went red. How's that?